The harbor was still asleep when the old cargo vessel slowly left the dock. The sky was a deep shade of blue, moments before sunrise, and the ocean stretched endlessly into the darkness. A young deckhand named Daniel stood near the railing, watching the faint glow of the horizon. It was only his third month working at sea, and every voyage still felt like the beginning of a new adventure. The crew had been hired to transport supplies between distant islands across a wide stretch of open ocean. It was not considered a dangerous route. The waters were usually calm, and the journey rarely took more than 4 days. For most of the sailors on board, it was just another routine trip. But the ocean has a way of turning routine into disaster without warning. Daniel had always dreamed of working on ships. As a child, he would sit on the beach for hours, watching vessels appear and disappear beyond the horizon. The ocean fascinated him. It looked peaceful from the shore, almost gentle. But the older sailors often warned him that the sea had two faces, one that welcomed you, and one that tested whether you deserved to return home. On the second day of the voyage, the weather began to change. At first, it was only a subtle shift in the wind. The waves grew slightly larger, and the sky turned a dull grey. The captain studied the clouds carefully from the bridge, his expression growing more serious with each passing hour. Storms in the open ocean can form quickly. By late afternoon, the waves were slamming against the hull with enough force to make the entire ship shudder. The wind howled through the metal structures of the vessel like a distant scream. The crew hurried across the deck, securing loose equipment while the ship climbed and dropped along the towering waves. Daniel had never seen the ocean like this before. The water looked alive. The storm exploded into full force shortly after nightfall. Rain poured down so heavily that it blurred everything beyond a few meters. Lightning illuminated the ocean in violent flashes, revealing mountains of water rising in every direction. Each wave struck the ship like a hammer. Inside the engine room, alarms suddenly began to echo through the ship. One of the engines had started overheating after water flooded part of the lower compartment. The chief engineer shouted orders as crew members rushed to contain the damage. But the storm was stronger than anything they had expected. A massive wave crashed across the deck, tearing away several storage containers and sending them sliding into the dark ocean. The ship groaned under the pressure as it struggled to maintain balance. Then, the unthinkable happened. One of the engines failed completely. Without full power, the ship could no longer face the waves properly. The bow began turning sideways to the storm, the most dangerous position a vessel could be in during rough seas. For a moment, it felt as if the ocean itself had grabbed the ship. The captain ordered everyone to secure themselves immediately. The crew rushed to grab safety harnesses and hold on to anything they could. The deck tilted sharply as another enormous wave struck the side of the vessel. Daniel slammed against the railing as the ship lurched violently. Somewhere deep within the metal body of the ship, something snapped. A loud crack echoed through the storm. Water began pouring into the lower compartments. The crew fought desperately to activate emergency pumps, but the flooding spread faster than they could control it. Every passing minute made the ship heavier as more seawater filled its interior. The captain made the decision no sailor ever wants to hear. Prepare the lifeboats. The order spread quickly through the ship. The crew moved with urgency, their faces illuminated by flashes of lightning as they prepared the emergency vessels. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Within minutes, the first lifeboat was lowered into the violent ocean. The waves tossed it like a toy, but the crew managed to climb aboard one by one. Behind them, the cargo ship was slowly dying. The once powerful vessel now drifted helplessly in the storm, its bow sinking lower with every passing moment. Then, with a final groaning sound of tearing metal, the ship disappeared beneath the black water. The storm continued to rage, but now the crew floated alone in the endless ocean. Inside the lifeboat, there were 12 survivors, 12 men surrounded by thousands of kilometers of open sea. The storm eventually passed sometime during the night, leaving behind a quiet that felt almost unnatural. The sky cleared slowly, revealing stars scattered across the darkness. But the calm ocean did not bring comfort. It only reminded them how small they truly were. The lifeboat carried limited supplies, a few containers of water, emergency rations, and a small distress radio that had been damaged during the evacuation. The radio produced nothing but static. Day after day, the survivors drifted across the ocean. The sun burned their skin during the daytime, and the cold winds chilled them at night. Every drop of water was carefully rationed. Hope slowly began to fade. On the fifth day, one of the sailors spotted something moving beneath the water. A large, dark shadow circled slowly under the lifeboat. Then another appeared. Sharks. The predators moved gracefully beneath the surface, curious about the small group of humans floating above them. The men watched in silence, barely breathing, afraid that any sudden movement might attract the creatures closer. But the sharks eventually disappeared into the deep. Days turned into a week. The survivors grew weaker with each passing sunrise. Their skin cracked under the relentless sun, and their bodies ached from dehydration. Daniel often stared at the horizon, searching for ships that never appeared. But something strange began to happen as time passed. The men started to change. At first, they had panicked, arguing and shouting in fear. But the ocean slowly stripped away that chaos. Survival forced them to cooperate, to trust each other, to share every last drop of water. They became quieter, stronger in a different way. The ocean was teaching them patience. On the ninth day, a faint sound appeared in the distance. At first, Daniel thought it was just the wind. But then he heard it again, a low, mechanical rumble. Engines. He slowly stood up inside the lifeboat, squinting toward the horizon. Far away, a dark shape moved across the water. A ship. Energy surged through the exhausted survivors as they began waving pieces of cloth and shouting with what little strength they had left. For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. The distant vessel continued moving. Then suddenly, it changed direction. The ship was heading toward them. Relief spread across the lifeboat like a wave. When the rescue ship finally reached them, the sailors on board stared in disbelief at the group of survivors drifting alone in the open ocean. Daniel collapsed onto the deck as strong hands helped him aboard. For the first time in days, he felt solid ground beneath his feet. As the rescue vessel carried them back toward land, Daniel looked out across the endless ocean, one last time. The sea looked peaceful again, almost innocent. But he knew the truth now. The ocean was never truly calm. It simply waited. And those who survived its tests would never see the horizon the same way again.